Let's bring in some analysis from someone who knows this story and has been reporting for us from the ground in the region on many occasions, and of course was a former correspondent based in the region. That's our senior international correspondent, Margaret Evans. Margaret, I'm glad to have your voice on all of this the day after the big announcement, because you have been covering this story, as I mentioned, for months. All of the process, the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, finally culminating in that announcement yesterday, and yet there are still holdups in terms of finalizing the deal. So what are you hearing, and how do you understand that?
Well, as you say, the Israeli Prime Minister has come out with this, or his office has come out with this statement basically accusing Hamas of demanding some last-minute concessions. We've seen reports of Hamas denying that, putting the blame on Israel. And that, of course, has been the narrative throughout the course of the ceasefire negotiations over the past year. In the background, there is talk about the Israeli Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, making extra demands of Mr. Netanyahu. He's the finance minister. He is a hard-line nationalist. He is opposed to this hostage deal, and he wants the war to continue. Behind the scenes, unconfirmed reports that he's demanded some kind of written guarantee from Benjamin Netanyahu that he would continue the war once they reached the first phase of this ceasefire agreement. As you know, it's in 3 parts. There are also unconfirmed reports that Hamas has tried to introduce prisoners, Palestinian detainees, that it wants to be on the list for initial exchange with some of the Israeli hostages, high-level Palestinian detainees. These would be people that Hamas would consider political prisoners or resistance fighters, but that Israel would say are terrorists with blood on their hands. And those people, those more contentious names, aren't supposed to be dealt with until phase 2 of this negotiation. So, and I must stress, those are unconfirmed reports, but we do have a delay. That's not surprising given the history of the negotiations over the past year. But what it is doing is increasing the genuine anguish of people. The Palestinians were celebrating last night. The fighting is ongoing. The Israeli airstrikes will continue until the ceasefire begins. There have been 70 people reported already today in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. And of course, for the families of the hostages who don't like the deal to begin with, in that it kind of has hostages being released in drips and drabs. They want them all released at the same time, but they're anxious to see anybody get out. So that anguish for those people on both sides is really intensified as they wait to see whether or not the cabinet is indeed going to approve this deal. Mr. Smotrich has some influence in that he's threatening to pull out of the government. Most people think if he pulled his ministers out, that Netanyahu could still survive with the support of some opposition candidates who are willing to support a hostage agreement. So that's a bit of inside baseball there.
Margaret, you mentioned second phase. We know, and you've been reporting certainly, what a complex agreement this is. Multi-phase. We're talking about the first phase taking effect on Friday with the release of the first of the hostages. But let's look down the road to the third phase of this, and that's to focus on the rebuilding of Gaza. What would that look like, and what are the challenges there?
You know, it's really the most difficult part of this because, as you say, this 3 phases. And what the negotiators have done have gotten this to this first stage by basically pushing off these issues like the future of Gaza. Israel has been criticized for refusing to talk about it, beyond saying that it will maintain its presence in Gaza, because if it doesn't, it can't guarantee the security of Israeli citizens. It has wanted to dictate who would be in charge. It has said the Palestinian Authority cannot be in charge. Of course, the Palestinians say, we will choose who's in charge. And the Americans are saying that there has to be a path for the Palestinians towards eventual statehood. But this Israeli government says it can never allow that. It is firmly opposed to Palestinian statehood. So those, in the rebuilding of Gaza, the implication is who's going to be in charge. And there is no agreement on that. There's no agreement even, we saw the European Union today coming out and pledging money to help rebuild Gaza. We saw the Qataris yesterday saying we will continue to support the Gazans, this destruction, this sort of huge rebuilding that will take place. But nobody even knows when that would be slated to begin, and these are the sort of the issues that go to the very heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we're still dealing with an occupation that is more than half a century old now, and it's just a reminder of how serious those issues are. And that's why people are pessimistic. You get through phase one, can you get to phase two? They hope that they could build some goodwill. But part of the problem with this three-phased approach is that it basically allows both sides to hedge their bets a little bit. They're holding something back because the expectation is they're going to come to a difficult place again, and they want their bargaining chips to still be in place. Very, very complicated path forward.
Margaret, thank you, and thank you for sorting it out for us and with us this morning. We'll look forward to talking with you about this as this continues to play out. But Sunday, the day when phase one is set to take effect.